I wrote a book called Explanations and Corrections in the Gospel of Luke that I copyrighted this year, 2021. And this video is about a chapter called Luke Thought That the Abomination of Desolation Was Armies. So I wrote, the important part of this book begins here. Compare Mark 13:14 with Luke 21:20. Mark 13:14 says, "But when ye see the abomination of desolation standing where he ought not, let him that readeth understand, then let them that are in Judea flee unto the mountains." Luke 21:20 through 21 says, "But when ye see Jerusalem compassed with armies, then know that her desolation is at hand. Then let them that are in Judea flee unto the mountains, and let them that are in the midst of her depart out, and let not them that are in the country enter therein." Despite the exhortation, "Let him that readeth understand," Luke knew that a lot of people misunderstood anyway. So he rephrased Jesus' words, replacing a metaphor with its meaning and using synonymous repetitions. Some of the ideas guiding Luke in his rewrite were: Luke knew that the desolating abomination of Mark 13 and of Daniel 9:27, Douay, was the fourth beast in Daniel chapter 7. The beast could be construed as a king, his kingdom, or his armies. Luke knew that Jesus meant armies. Gentile armies ought not to be in Judea around Jerusalem because Gentiles are unclean and Jerusalem should be holy. The standing of the fourth beast of Daniel 7 represented the besieging or encompassing of the city by an army of Gentile soldiers. Two very different causes mean the same thing. Two very different clauses mean the same thing. To say that the Jerusalemites should flee is the same as to say that the desolation of Jerusalem was at hand. Luke knew that the phrase abomination of desolation meant an abomination or Gentile army that was to desolate Jerusalem, so he changed the metaphor to unambiguous prose. The words, "Let them that are in Judea flee to the mountains," meant to flee to avoid getting caught in a siege. Luke added explanatory words after the clause, saying in different words what people in a city and in the country should do before any siege that was certain to be successful and devastating. Notice that Luke turned the phrase "of desolation" into a clause, making it clear that the abomination desolates and that Jerusalem is the thing it is going to desolate. I'd say more about that elsewhere. Luke probably substituted the word Jerusalem for the phrase "where it ought not" because too many readers did not understand correctly. And Luke substituted armies for the abomination of desolation because some people, maybe even including Theophilus, for whom he wrote, erroneously interpreted the abomination of desolation as an individual called the Antichrist or the man of sin, just as some people do today. Or Theophilus might have heard other wrong theories that I mention elsewhere in this book. An English translator reveals something about his interpretation by his choice of pronouns in this passage. Some English Bibles are similar to the American Standard Version and say "where he ought not" in Mark 13:14. Those Bibles may be guided by a masculine participle in Greek, or else by the doctrine that the abomination is the Antichrist. The Antichrist would have to be called "he," not "it," in English, if the Antichrist is conceived to be a man. But more translations read "where it ought not," possibly being guided by the idea that the abomination of desolation is either an idol or abominable pollution, which things can't be called "he" in English. In Luke 19:43 through 44, Before Jesus' longer prophecy about when the temple would be destroyed, Jesus threatens Jerusalem with a devastating siege. For the day shall come upon thee when thine enemies shall cast up a bank around thee, and compass thee round, and keep thee in on every side, and shall dash thee to the ground, and thy children with thee, and they shall not leave in thee one stone upon another, because thou knewest not the time of thy visitation. In the verses above, Luke uses language later echoed in Luke 21:20 through 24, referring to a devastating defeat by Gentile armies. Luke 21:20 says that Jerusalem would be compassed or besieged, the same thing that was described in chapter 19. Just like the last quoted passage, Luke 21:23 alludes to the special difficulty for women with children at a time of war and siege. The women knew that children were sometimes eaten during sieges, according to Deuteronomy 28:53 through 57. Verse 24 refers to being killed by the sword and being taken captive into foreign countries, and also identifies the armies as Gentile. Luke added his unique sections in chapters 19 and 23, clearly referring to sieges, not just because he learned it from oral tradition or from a lost section of Mark, but to make sure that Theophilus understood that the abomination of desolation was a Gentile army destined to besiege and destroy Jerusalem, not Antichrist or an idol. Albert Barnes wrote this in his footnote on Matthew 24:15. The abomination of desolation. This is a Hebrew expression meaning an abominable or hateful destroyer. The Gentiles were all held in abomination by the Jews. Acts 10:28. The abomination of desolation means the Roman army, and is so explained by Luke 21:20. The Roman army is further called the abomination on account of the images of the emperor and the eagles carried in front of the legions, and regarded by the Romans with divine honors. The objections I have to his explanation may seem petty, but he should have called it the destroying abomination instead of the abominable destroyer, keeping the word abomination as a noun and desolate or destroy as the verb. Of course, the meaning is very similar both ways, and he should have omitted all references to eagle standards and idols. I'll explain in the next chapter how the phrase abomination of desolation could mean armies with or without idols. And then I'm going to eliminate this last paragraph because I'm just speculating like how that it would have made sense if the pronoun was he, but I'm going to omit it to keep the video shorter, and because Luke didn't really agree with that interpretation anyway. So this is sort of a review of what I was saying in that chapter. Mark 13:14 says, but when ye see the abomination of desolation standing where he ought not, let him that readeth understand, then let them that are in Judea flee to the mountains. But people did not understand the very words of Jesus spoken with the figures of speech from Daniel. So Luke saw those words, but he wrote them differently because people would misunderstand. But when ye see Jerusalem compassed with armies, so Jerusalem is where he ought not stand. Compassed refers to standing. The way to visualize this is probably to visualize the fourth wild beast of Daniel 7 standing, but the thought is interchangeable with Gentile armies. So when you see Jerusalem compassed with armies, then know that her desolation is at hand. It's not just a coincidence that the abomination of desolation has the noun desolation, and Luke explains it with, and Luke explains what Luke is doing is explaining what the desolation part of that phrase means. Then know that her desolation is at hand. Her is the city of Jerusalem. So the armies are the abomination, the unclean Gentiles, and specifically the unclean army, because the fourth wild beast of Daniel could be construed as the army of desolation. What does that mean? It means that it desolates Jerusalem. And this is an explanation by Luke. He did not get this material that I shaded in pink from another gospel. It's explanations he's inserted. Okay, so in Mark it says, then let them that are in Judea flee to the mountains. Luke practically quotes that, and then he adds more explanation. And let them that are in the midst of her depart out. So if you're in Jerusalem, get out. And let not them that are in the country enter therein. It was normal for people in the country to go for the safety of the city walls when an army was coming to attack it. But he said the siege is going to work. Jerusalem's cursed, so get out. Now, the same passage, Mark 13:14, spoke of the abomination of desolation, and I've already mentioned that earlier, but where you find that phrase in Luke's rewrite is the abomination is the armies that compass or besiege, and the desolation is her desolation. The pronoun her refers to Jerusalem, which was feminine. Now, so armies do desolate cities with sieges, and Luke added material neither in Matthew nor in Mark, in Luke 19 and in Luke 23, as well as the material in chapter 21. So the reader would have to know that Gentile armies were going to come and besiege and destroy Jerusalem in accordance with the prophecies in Deuteronomy. But if you think that an idol is the abomination of desolation, then you disagree with Luke, because he emphasized the best he could that it's Gentile armies. And a lot of people think the abomination of desolation is Antichrist, and likewise I think a lot of them did in the first century. And if you think that he's the Antichrist, well, then your Antichrist explanation should involve the Antichrist desolating Jerusalem, or else you don't agree with Luke.